Hey, you guys, I'm Pretty Urban Witch here with talking about the retrogrades that I've been finally meaning to get to. Um, I'd actually done a couple videos already, but both of them basically got ruined and corrupted, so I couldn't get those out. Um, so what I'm going to do is quick overview. And by quick, I really do mean quick. I know I've run pretty long on a lot of videos, just talking too much, but I'm going to try to pack as much information into one short video as I can. I'll give you the real basic overview with some pointers, and eventually it's like I'll go into the specifics that each zodiac sign should be paying attention to as we move through these retrogrades. I got my chart over here. Unfortunately, I don't have the technology level to, have the chart pop up, but I'm overdue for talking about this stuff. So I'm going to get you the information as quickly as possible so you kind of know what you're working with and what you're looking at. So when I've talked about retrograde season, I'm talking about a season that started right around, I want to say, April 25th. And we're not going to be out of this retrograde season pretty much until January 1st, 2021. So what we're looking at right now is that on the 25th, Pluto started to retrograde. We're not even going to worry about the dates. You can look up the dates. A lot of the shit that I'm talking about, you can look this up, but through all of the digging, through all of the research, through everything that I've done, coupled with the pattern recognition stuff that I have and being able to fit these puzzle pieces together, this is the thing that I'm not seeing, lined up. This is the content that I'm not seeing that's out there. So you can get the details. So what I want to give you is the deficiency, the shit that I'm not seeing that's out there. So very basically, what we're looking at is right now, as of the times that have already started, like the beginnings of the retrogrades that have already happened and the retrogrades that are going to be happening for the rest of the year. That's the part that I want to talk about. So let's see. What is this? I'm just checking the chart here. So that's, see, that's already coming up. So Pluto, the planets that are in retrograde right now as of Wednesday, May 20th, are Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus. Those are already in retrograde. Now, a lot of sensitives are going to be feeling, probably were already feeling the effects of these retrogrades weeks before, maybe even up to a month before, depending on how sensitive you are, which means that we also have a Mercury retrograde coming up. It's a short one, but because of all the rest of the retrogrades overlapping, it's going to be pretty intense retrograde. And that's coming up on June 19th, June 17th, somewhere around there. Again, you can look up the dates. So a lot of people might already be feeling the shadow of that retrograde, might already be experiencing the light version of that retrograde. But let me talk about the 5 that are already in place right now. So Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter, and Venus. Pluto, overall, let me just give you each one in a word. Pluto overall is talking about change. Pluto wants us to take a look at change. Saturn wants us to take a look at the socio-political stuff, the cultural stuff. Now we're stacking these basically. We're stacking these. So we're talking about change. We're also talking about socio-political change. We're also talking about, as Jupiter is in retrograde, we're also talking about abundance. So with Jupiter, the sort of catchword is that abundance hangs in the balance. Now, we move on to Venus retrograde. Venus retrograde specifically, it carries with it and puts on our workbench a sense of revival, almost a renaissance. Some sources have likened it to a revisitation of the summer of love, but like not the summer of love where everyone's sitting around smoking weed and having orgies and shit like that. I mean, there is that, but more specifically, the sort of core principles and the core movements behind that. Awakening of love, of creativity, of sensuality, of all of the stuff that, you know, you've seen pretty much your entire life that we've been trying to sort of move towards, but it's been this uphill battle. Now is the time that that's on the work table where we can kind of take advantage of that. The other tricksy thing about, and this is where we start getting into the layers and we start getting into the puzzle pieces, the other tricksy part about the Venus retrograde is that when Venus comes around, if you are in a relationship that you are not supposed to be in, Venus will break it up. If the relationship is meant to be, it might be rough getting through, but Venus will not break it up. So that's important to pay attention to, knowing that we've got this Mercury retrograde coming up. Now, the final layer to this, and these are detailed layers. Now we're talking about like the sort of umbrella layer that's happening, one of the umbrella layers that's happening that holds about as much weight as the rest of the upcoming retrogrades for this year, is that we pass through these zodiac seasons. You know, if you were born in, you know, April, then you're probably in Aries. Might be a Taurus. That kind of feel. So we already know that those exist, but what not a lot of people are aware of is that regardless of what zodiac sign you are, when you pass through that season, you need to pay attention to the aspects of that season, that what I like to say is like the themes of that particular season. So Taurus season is ending. Taurus season has been on us for about a month now. It ends at the end of this week, moves into Gemini season. Taurus season has been about commerce and self-worth. So a lot of people looking at starting up projects, they're going to move themselves towards stability. A lot of that stuff has been kind of like moving, and there's a lot of opportunities that I've seen people already reaching for and already sort of like waking up to and putting their hands to. So that's good. Now, as we move into Gemini season, Gemini is about mindset and community. After that, we have Cancer, which is home and family. Now, that little transition is tricksy, as these other retrogrades, these are long retrogrades. These are retrogrades that are happening for months. The ones that I'm talking about, Pluto, I'm talking about Saturn, I'm talking about Jupiter. These are happening for months now. These are happening close towards the end of summer, beginning of fall. Venus is ending pretty much about midway through June, maybe end of June. Mercury retrograde is starting before Venus ends. Mercury retrograde is starting right around mid-June. Those two are going to overlap. Now here's the thing, going back to what I said, Venus has got a lot of great shit on the work table for us right now, but there is also that caveat. If you're in a relationship you're not supposed to be in, Venus will break that up. Now, here's the thing about human behavior. Most people are in relationships that they're not supposed to be in, so there is a high likelihood that Venus will break your shit up. We know how that feels. That feels like shit. That's going to feel like shit as the Mercury retrograde starts to come around and starts to fuck everything up, because that's the most noticeable retrograde for everybody, for metaphysical cats, people who pay attention to astrology, witchy folks like that. Like, we pay attention to that. We feel that most of. We feel like everything gets fucked up right around that, the Mercury retrograde. So if we're going through breakup and if we're going through heartache during that time as Mercury retrograde ramps up, that's going to be rough, because that means that we're moving through a period where we should be paying attention to mindset and community, and then moving into a sense of home and family. And if we're going through that heartbreak, then home and family is going to feel like shit. Home and family is going to feel like there is nothing for us at that point. We're going to be licking our wounds and trying to recover from that shit. That makes it tough as we move into second phase. So with second phase, Pluto is still running. Pluto is still talking about change. Saturn is still running. Saturn is still talking about socio-political changes. Jupiter is still running. Jupiter is still talking about abundance. By abundance hanging in the balance, I mean that there is a lot of abundance that can be shifted here right now, especially if we work with the creative energies of Venus. Then that gives us a chance to be like, okay, that which I have not had before, now I have access to get these things, but I have to tap into my creative energies. I have to tap into and be open to what I can do so that I can invite abundance into my life. Barring that, if you don't do that, then you're not sowing the seeds that you're going to want to harvest in the fall. And we're going to talk about that in just a second here too. See, I've already hit the 10-minute mark and I'm already over talking this shit, and I'm still going to try to keep it tight. Now, the reason why that's going to be rough, if you're going through a breakup, if you're going through heartache, as Venus ends and as Mercury starts, is because as Mercury ends, Neptune and Chiron are starting their retrogrades as well. Now, the thing about the Neptune retrograde is that this is, in a word, this is a matter of dispelling illusions. This is going to be a matter of dispelling illusions that you've told yourself personally, individually, internally. This is going to be a matter of dispelling illusions again on the socio-political sort of like front, on the abundance front, on the front of change. A lot of things, basically this year, a lot of things need to be happening that are completely different. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the dispelling illusions part in just a second. Let's move on. Let's move over. And I apologize that it's so jumpy, but this is how they've stacked. When I talked about this last year with certain people, I was like, mid-year of 2020, it is fucking going down. So we talk about Chiron. Chiron is basically, if you think of the Mercury retrograde as this positive upgrade experience, this place where you can dig in, do some real heavy, probably painful healing work to strengthen yourself and upgrade yourself and become a stronger and better and more stable person once you get through that retrograde, then you have to consider that Chiron is like fucking Mercury retrograde on steroids. Like, that's going to happen. Like, you're going to have a lot of healing to do, and it's going to be a lot of heavy lifting, and there's going to be a lot of surgery, self-surgery that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to really cut yourself open and do a lot of painful shit because of the fact that right around the same time that shelter in place started happening, right around like mid-March, that's when Chiron squared with the north and south nodes. Okay. Now, the north and south nodes, what that means is that one basically deals with old karma, unfinished karma that you brought with you into this life, and north node deals with future karma. Now, to have those two come together and have those two square with Chiron, the thing that we're really kind of looking at here is that we have a chance to fix our old karma by rewriting the scripts on new karma. Now, another thing that gets overlooked when people talk about old karma, and say, oh, they're still dealing with some old karma. That's why they're suffering, because they haven't resolved that shit. People never talk about how you're supposed to fucking resolve that shit. The way that you resolve old karma is by rewriting the scripts on new karma. And with old karma, the thing that's overlooked is that when you start this life and you enter this life carrying that old karma, you also get a sort of predetermined skill set. You have certain skills and abilities and certain knowledge that is going to help you get to that point where you can rewrite the scripts on future karma. Now, the thing here is that our entire lives we've used those skills and those skill sets and those abilities in a certain way. And with the movements that are happening, we're being asked to use them in a completely different way in order for us to rewrite that new karma, that future karma. Like, that's the thing. It's like if we keep using these same skills in the same way, we're not going to resolve the old karma that we have. And if we pass this point, we might be able to, chip away at it but we're still probably going to be carrying that same old luggage that we fucking showed up with into the next life. The same shit that we were carrying in this life, we'll probably have to carry it into the next life, unless we hop on that shit now, which is rough. So in a word, if you're going through shit right now that feels tough, you know you're supposed to do this thing, you know that you've got to get through this, and you just don't fucking want to, that's telling you that you need to. That's telling you that if you want to let go of this old karma, then you need to use all of this shit in a different way. Everything that you've done, everything. What I've been doing lately too is changing just little things in daily routine, just getting my mind in that space of being like, everything you need to do is different. All the way from these little daily tasks, the order that I do my routine, the order that I do shit, when I wake up, when I go to bed, all the way up to the much, much larger shit, which is fixing all the stuff inside me that has been a problem and has been a blockage for me, so that I can rewrite the scripts to new karma, and so that I could come out being the person that I always wanted to be, the person that I knew I was supposed to become. But that doesn't just happen. None of this shit just happens. People mistake a lot of like astrology and tarot shit for, if I see it right here, then I guess that's how that's going to be. No, we have control, and as human beings, we have the choice. We have the choice to say, this thing hurts, and I'm going to get through this anyway. Or we can choose, this thing hurts, and I'm just going to sit down and give up for a little while, and then pick up and do it. We've had practice with that. We've had practice calling out sick, literally, to our jobs, and then also sort of metaphysically and emotionally just in our own lives. This is not the time to call out. Now is crunch time. Now is all hands on deck. I've mentioned this before. Sorry, that was a little bit long in kind of covering that spot, but I really wanted to like nail down that dynamic. Because with Chiron in retrograde, Chiron is going to allow us to move through and fix the karma that we brought in with us in this life, that old karma. It's going to allow us to fix that old karma, and not just our personal karma. We are actually in a space, and especially with some of these retrogrades, like I forget which one, I think it's like Saturn, hasn't come around for like 140 years. Last time that shit came around, there were huge leaps and bounds in invention, in world-changing stuff that affects us today. Like 140 years later, we're still riding with shit that happened during this last retrograde that happened 140 years ago in this particular position. So it's a heavy time. And whatever we do right now, like whatever we set up right now, I've been talking about this mid-year, the world goes malleable enough for us to change literally everything practically overnight. I've been saying that. Now the thing is, as this window closes, as this retrograde season comes to an end, as these retrogrades start to come to an end, all that malleable shit, anything that we have shaped or that we have decided not to touch and not shape, it's going to stay like that. It's going to stay like that for a very, very, very long time. So that's why it's important for us to do the most important work of our lives during this time. That's some heavy shit. I know that's some heavy shit, and especially with everything that's going on, you're like, how the fuck do I have spoons for this? That's up to you. That's between you and God. You know, that's between you and God and your own personal business, however you feel like you can rise to this challenge, or if you want to just fucking call it and carry that karma with you into the next life and then hope you got a better shot at trying to resolve it then. I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm just showing you the road signs that are here. So as that starts to move, as we're moving through Cancer season, which is home and family, as Neptune is starting to ask us to break through illusions, as Chiron is starting to ask us to get to all of that wounded healer shit and start fixing our own shit and start fixing everything that we fucking can, like the old karma that we can, Uranus is going to start to retrograde. And I'll talk about Uranus maybe on a little bit of a different one. I think that deserves its own sort of, it deserves its own episode. So we'll talk about that. But basically, very basically boiled down, Uranus is going to start giving us the skills. We're going to start accumulating the skills that we're going to need for the next yearly cycle. Like, that's kind of how that lines up for us. Now, the real motherfucker is that if we are sowing the seeds that we need in terms of Jupiter's abundance, in terms of coupling that with Venus's creativity, in terms of the overall change that Pluto asks us for, and the very specific socio-political changes that Saturn is asking us for, then that means we've planted good crops. And we're going to go through this rough period as these other retrogrades, the second phase of retrogrades, starts happening through Cancer season, home and family. That means that if we're doing, on one side, if we're doing the right shit, then that means we enter Leo season, which the theme is creativity and fun. We start really getting a second wind for the shit that we're doing, for the seeds that we've planted, for the crops that we are maintaining for our lives, for eventual harvest. As we move through Leo season into Virgo season, Virgo wants us to address health and habits. As Virgo season exits, we're going to enter Libra season. Libra is going to want us to address relationships and equality. Eventually, we move, after that, we move into, in the October month, we start moving into Scorpio season, which wants us to address transformation and forgiveness. That's when the final Mercury retrograde happens as well. Now, that final Mercury retrograde also happens during about a 2-month period where Mars retrogrades in Venus. So what does Mars and Venus mean? Basically, you can consider this an amplifier of absolutely every fucking astrological thing that's happening right now. All of that shit that's happening right now is just going to fucking amplify it. So if you're sowing good seeds right now and you're tending good harvest, you're tending good crop through the summertime, then that means you're going to have this intense harvest as we move through the Mars retrograde that happens in Aries. Now, if you kind of fuck it off right now and you don't sow the seeds that you need to sow, and you do kind of fuck it off during the summertime in terms of maintaining crops, then that retrograde in the fall into winter, where Mars retrogrades through Aries, that's going to feel like a motherfucker, and that's going to feel like real fucking defeat. And a lot of people are already lining themselves up for it by holding on to expectations of this old world, of these old versions of themselves, and that's not the way to get through to repairing old karma and rewriting the scripts on new karma by doing the same old shit that we've always done personally, as a fucking nation, as a fucking people, culturally, all of that stuff, like from the highest levels all the way down to the most personal levels. So that's how that all kind of lines up. That's the big overview on why everybody's suddenly talking about this retrograde season. And again, you can dig up very specific details. You can look up anything that you got a question about. You can either reach out to me or you can dig this information up bit by bit. But it's just that I've collated all of this information and I've plugged it into the patterns and the systems that I see, and especially the patterns and systems of the timeline. So you can see all of that, all of those details, and I'll go into these details more if you're interested in just kind of following along and having that information more fed to you in a more digestible manner. I hope this is a digestible manner. There's a lot of information, but I try to be as real talk about it as possible. So again, on the upcoming episodes, I'm going to be going over the specific zodiac signs and talking about who specifically needs what, who needs to be paying attention to what, as all of the rest of this shit is happening around you. As this is the environment that's happening around you, this is how you need to navigate through this environment. That's the part. That's the part where it adds even more of a tricky layer to all of this. Okay, so I'll be going over those specifically. There are like a few key points that I'll touch on. For instance, I know for myself as an Aries sun, there are specific things that I'm supposed to be paying attention to. I'm supposed to be backing off a lot of my own social political stuff, which has been a huge thing for me for 30 years. So it is a scary thing to let go of that and trust that there are other people pushing for socio-political change. And instead, I need to be moving towards finding spiritual commonality. That's just one example. For one of these retrogrades, I forget exactly which one, but I'll talk about that when I talk about other people's shit specifically. Aries is going to be heavily challenged during these retrograde seasons. Taurus, on the other hand, is going to find these retrograde seasons difficult. So the difference between challenging and difficult is a bit of a balance, and I'll go into those nuances a little bit later. So if you're looking forward to more of it, please like the video, subscribe, follow on. Again, reach out to me for any questions that you got. Also, I probably should put a link to my Patreon page in the either in my bio or in the links below, where I talk about a little bit more metaphysical stuff, and I also do metaphysical forecasting, weather reports, basically, for like get hit with a day and feel like I got to pull cards, and I should pull cards for the entire world to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing is happening out here today. I can go into more of that shit later, but just look for some links. If you don't see them, hit me up and be like, dude, you're lazy ass. Where's the links? Show me some stuff. Again, I'll be seeing you on the next episode. Thank you again.